everyone, my name is Sara and I am part of the NOVAsia team here at Yonsei University, GSIS. Today we're speaking with Simone, Dmitriy, and Matt, who are also members of the team, and our guest, David. Today's topic will be about Hong Kong and the cultural aspects of Hong Kong. David is from there originally. David, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I am a first semester GSI student studying ITFM, originally from Hong Kong, and really nice to see you guys.
As people may have noticed, it's a bit different from our usual podcasts that have been released on the YouTube channel. Unfortunately, South Korea has gone into level 2 distancing, so we were not able to meet in person. So I hope that the way that we're delivering this podcast this time round is suitable, and we look forward to the day when we're able to meet again in person and do our podcast that way. So, who wants to get started?
I guess I'll do. Yep. I don't know what to start with because it's like Hong Kong is a very distant place, even from here, I think, because I don't even know what exactly to call it because it's such a sensitive topic. But I think Hong Kong is separate from mainland China, at least in terms of culture. Should I say it or not? I'm not really sure, but that's what I think. And I'm quite afraid of your facial expression now, David. So could you please explain why?
I think we need a bit of history of Hong Kong first. I think not many people actually know about Hong Kong, real history, right? So originally we start as a fishing village, but because we have a very nice harbor, the British got their eyes on us. So, and then into the Qing dynasty. So maybe some people know the British Empire fought with the Qing dynasty to China back then, and then they have a couple of different treaty, and then the Chinese government back then basically just sold Hong Kong Island to the British Empire, and then from now on that was 1842. So Hong Kong become part of the British Empire, and then later there was another couple wars. They fought, and then they sell the Kowloon and New Territories, which are a different area of Hong Kong right now, and then they rent those part to the UK as well. And then fast forward to 1997, China got bigger, China got rich, and the lease was due, so they hand it back to the UK handed it back to China. So that's the history. And throughout the colonial time, we all speak Cantonese, while the Chinese in the mainland, they keep on with they keep speaking in Mandarin. That's the main cultural difference, I think. And during those times, there are always people coming down because China was always on lockdown, and that's how Hong Kong got so populated and become so rich as well.
So before the colonial times, was Hong Kong an independent territory that China just signed over, or was Hong Kong actually a Chinese territory?
During the colonial time, we are British. Before the colonial time, it was Chinese territory, but we were only a fishing village. There was nobody there.
I think one of the things that you brought up that was really interesting is the language part of the Mandarin versus Cantonese. And I think if I heard you right, you said that Mandarin was spoken mostly in mainland China, while Cantonese seems to be more popular in Hong Kong. Is that right?
Yes. Actually, it was very popular within the Canton province, which is where Hong Kong is also located. But these days, because China trying to, if you have only one language in a country, it functions better, right? So they try to push Mandarin as the main language in the country. So people who actually speak Cantonese in China are decreasing dramatically. So it's one of the dying language actually, because everybody just gotta speak Mandarin. If you speak Mandarin, you get better job.
Even in southern China?
Yes, because if you speak Cantonese, nobody can communicate with you. If you can speak Mandarin, you can go anywhere in China and get really good job.
Does that have like a role to play with like traditional characters versus simplified characters?
They don't have a very big relationship with each other. It was basically during the Cultural Revolution the communist Chinese government want more people to be able to read, so they changed the Chinese letter into a simplified one. But it did not happen in Hong Kong and Taiwan because we were not under the other government control back then, so we keep our traditional letters. But in my opinion, I think the traditional Chinese is prettier, and I think it retains more of our cultural aspect as a Chinese ethnicity.
So it's like not prohibiting to speak Cantonese, but making it like kind of more difficult for you to be a part of the society, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's something kind of similar to maybe other countries as well, where they have different dialects.
I think yeah, this way it reminds me of what happened in the USSR back then. Because like people just generally spoke different languages and they weren't prohibited to, but it was much easier and much more profitable for you to speak Russian back then, because like Russian was international and you could find a job, you could get like all the benefits of being the citizen of the USSR, and that's why gradually other languages like Kazakh, Uzbek, they started to fade, and the older generations, they sometimes, even though they're Kazakh or other like ethnicity representatives, they don't speak their original language
Exactly.
as I do. To be honest, like my grandfather, my grandfather's grandmother, they do speak Korean, but father and mother, they don't speak Korean because it wasn't necessary, it wasn't needed. So yeah,
Right.
that what happens to you, I think too.
That's like me as well because I'm Chinese Malaysian, but I guess like Cantonese is considered to be a spoken language now. So I don't know how it is in Hong Kong, if there is a way that they formalize the education to teach Cantonese in schools, but in Southeast Asia, generally Cantonese is just a spoken language, and then most people who speak Cantonese or other dialects, sometimes they don't know how to read and write the characters, which is like my parents. But like Dimitri was saying, like I guess the value of these dialects is not seen to be as useful or like economically, yeah, not economically useful as Mandarin. So I myself as well don't, I can only understand Cantonese from my parents, but I can't speak or read or write. But like ironically, I ended up studying Mandarin in university. So when a lot of people are like, how come you don't speak Mandarin, or like how come you don't know Chinese, and it's like, well, actually my parents are not even Mandarin speakers. So I think that's like a not really a problem, but like an interesting situation that a lot of Chinese diaspora face.
I think it would be great if more people would know about us. Like people could actually know that there are different kind of Chinese. There's no Chinese. It's basically just like Indian. There's no Indian language, right? There are so many different languages in India, and same goes to China, basically. But it's just Cantonese and Mandarin are the two that are most popular these days. But then on the other side, I think it's very important for um, everyone on the planet to basically keep this dying language, because I think language is very much related to culture. If the language dies, the culture that comes with it will also die.
Sure.
And I love different cultures because I think they represent different sides of humanity.
Ian, a few weeks ago on a different podcast, who is Navajo, brought up the importance of language, as he's able to speak with the other people in his community using the Navajo language, but a lot of younger generations have actually started to lose it or no longer learn it, and sometimes can't even communicate fully with their elders. So it's definitely something we need to keep alive.
So in your perspective then, David, do you think that Hong Kong is doing a good job at preserving like Cantonese language and culture, or like how do they institute language education?
Officially, because we're under the Chinese government rule, they want us to learn Mandarin more. So there's not much help from the official channels, but by the people, we are starting to revolutionize our languages. We try to formalize it. We try to make it a written language as well. So there's lots of movement within the people. For example, we started to create our own dictionary for Cantonese. We started to uh, look for the words. We're starting to create words for the sound that we don't have in Chinese characters right now. And many people are hosting so many different Cantonese events on like YouTube channel, even in other universities all over the world as well. I remember when I was in Canada in the UBC, the University of British Columbia, they actually made a Cantonese courses for university students, and I was very surprised by it because I've never seen a Cantonese class anywhere on the planet other than Hong Kong.
I think everyone brought up the importance of how cultures are linked to these languages in these specific areas. And so you talked about how these individual areas can protect their languages and try to foster up them staying strong in their own areas. I was curious what you think about the idea of language unifying people under one language, because you brought up the idea that China wants everyone to start learning Mandarin. However, like on a more global scale, we see a lot of countries starting to shift towards English as like a unifying language. Do you see that as more of a hurtful trend where everyone moving towards trying to learn English then hurts you trying to protect your culture of that's connected to your language?
Personally, I think it's a very multi-dimensional topic, whether we should learn English or not, because there are countries who are very much affected by the colonial time. That's why many of these countries, they can't even they have English very much integrated into their language as well. So in that case, it's easier for them to learn English, but at the same time, it will be very easy for them to forget about their own language as well. But I think same for Chinese. I don't think it's a good thing for everybody just to speak English instead of their own language. I think English should be taught in the class, but I think most of the countries still use their own language as the base. Like, we shouldn't use English as an official language. We should all have our own identity, right?
I was wondering, like, in the recent events in Hong Kong, was it like the matter of the language difference brought up to the significant level, or was it like just a satellite problem?
To be honest, I think very similar to all the conflicts we had throughout history in all over the world. When you have people speaking different languages, it automatically creates a barrier between those two people, right? No matter how close their culture are, so when you can't understand each other, it's just difficult to communicate, and it makes it harder to understand each other. But the recent events on Hong Kong are more related to the democracy problem rather than a cultural difference. But I'm sure the cultural difference we had with the mainland China play certain role in this event too.
So was it like people just shouting in Cantonese during the protests, or did they use Mandarin?
Oh, all the people in Hong Kong speak Cantonese, unless we are trying to be sarcastic.
Okay.
So then, what do you think are some of the other main cultural differences between mainland China and Hong Kong? Do you think Hong Kong has kind of preserved more of like a ancient or traditional Chinese culture before being under control of the British?
I would say we retain more of the Chinese culture than the traditional Chinese culture than the mainland China, because the mainland China went through the cultural revolutions, and during those times they prohibited most of the traditional practice. They burned lots of books. They forbidden so many things, and then that was one of the time where Hong Kong absorbed most of the refugees from mainland China, and so in that case we retain many of the practice from the mainland China as well. And there are so many variation too when we have festivals. For example, when during the Mid-Autumn Festival, I've heard different stories from the mainland Chinese, and also the mooncake we eat is a little bit different too. And then in China, they said you're not supposed to break the mooncake, because if you break it, your family will not be united anymore. You have to eat the whole thing by yourself. But in our culture, it was like, you gotta break it. It's too big. You gotta share it with the whole family.
You should share, right?
Yeah, that's how a family works. To share. You break it and share it. So that's one funny thing I've heard before.
That's interesting.
Is there a dominant religion, or is it a mix of religions that exist in Hong Kong?
We are mainly Buddhist and Christian because of the British influence. But I would say we're mostly, I think it's about 50-50. 50% people just believe in Buddhist and then the other Christian.
I think a lot of people have become Christian because of the British at some point
all
in
over
history.
the world, all over the world. But in Hong Kong, we do have lots of historical structures like temples and shrine, statue, all those kind of stuff. Like if you ever come to Hong Kong, I could take you. You could spend weeks there.
Let's go
NOVAsia
after-
trip to Hong Kong.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a very small city, but there's a lot of things to see.
But like what you were saying about like Buddhism and Cantonese culture that's tied together, I think it's really interesting that so my family is Buddhist, but I'm not particularly religious. But I think it's really interesting how deeply tied like the Buddhist religion and Cantonese culture and festivals and practice and culture actually is. Because even though I'm not really religious, like I still practice the Cantonese like traditions and practices, and so for me I feel like it's very interlinked and it becomes kind of like a spiritual practice rather than just like a religious thing. What do you think about like that's from the Southeast Asian perspective though, so I don't know about how it would be like in Hong Kong, whether there's a separation between like just spiritual traditional culture or like if it's more like a religious dimension.
I think it certainly plays a very important role in terms of our self-identity because there are so many things we did that other Chinese won't do. And I myself is a very uncultured person in this aspect because I am a Christian. I was not a Buddhist and I never practiced any Buddhism spirit ritual or anything. But would you be able to share what do you do with your family, Simone?
Like for example, we have like an altar in my home in Malaysia, and like you usually pray to the ancestors, and
Right.
then also we're not really like Buddhist, we're kind of a mix of Taoists as well. So my dad will pray to the god of war, and also my mom prays to the goddess of mercy. So this is like not really a Buddhist aspect, I think, but I feel like a lot of Cantonese people have this Taoist dimension mixed in. But then also there's a lot of things like funeral rites or like celebrating the death anniversary of your ancestors, and also like you should burn some kind of like paper money or paper offerings on certain times of the year. Yeah, stuff like that. So, and then like wedding ceremonies as well, which I think some aspects of it, it's like not just like Buddhist religion, but also just
Right.
Cantonese culture in general. So yeah.
There, I think to be 100% political correct, we can't call those Buddhism, but it's more like a Cantonese culture. And yes,
Exactly,
I think
exactly.
yeah, and many of the people in Hong Kong do practice the same thing that you did with your family, and I think that's a very nice thing. And I think even some Christian would do the same thing too, because it's just part of their culture, part of their roots, to show your respect to the your ancestors, things. Yeah,
David, do you know what sect of Christianity you are?
Protestant.
Would you say there's like a majority of Protestants or Catholics in Hong Kong?
Catholic would more be a minority in Hong Kong. We have more Protestants in Hong Kong than Catholics.
If it was the British bringing it in, then they kind of split from the Catholics, if I recall. I think there was something about one of their kings wanting to divorce and Catholics couldn't do it, or who knows. I only know very limited British history.
It's King Henry VIII, I think, right?
He had like 6 wives, and like 1 he beheaded, 2 he divorced, and there's a rhyme that goes with
There
it.
is a rhyme. There is a rhyme for that. I mean, that's
What do you
one way
guys
to get
think
around
of?
it.
Oh, sorry.
No, I wasn't saying anything useful. You go ahead.
I was just wondering,
what do you guys think about colonialism? I mean, colonialism is definitely a very bad topic, very bad thing. But in the case of Hong Kong, they kind of help us. It's like a very, very minor cases. Like it doesn't happen anywhere at all. But for us, we actually got better than what we were and what we are.
Yeah, I actually agree with your point. It's because colonialism and like the country that occupies your territory is usually the more developed one. So it happened to Russia and Kazakhstan. So Kazakhstan, I'm not originally from Kazakhstan, but it's, from history, Russia did colonize Kazakhstan to some degree, but they brought along their technology, their fortresses. Some of the fortresses are still a heritage of like cities, of the borderline cities, and they brought some more like development and education. Of course, it came at the price of losing the indigenous culture, at some point indigenous population even, because there was a huge famine which spread across like the USSR, and it covered all of the territory. And because of that, it's a really weird balance between like what technology and what advancements can a country bring like to your country, but what can you lose from it too. So it's like really costly decision.
I 100% agree with Dimitri because Malaysia was also colonized by the British, and I think as well, like, of course it benefits, it depends on who you ask within the society, because for the case of Malaysia, we don't really have like a ethnic majority, or I mean, with, I guess you would consider the Malays to be the ethnic majority, but we have a really large population of Chinese and Indian Malaysians as well. So it depends on who you ask, but I feel like some people will get benefits from a relationship with a colonial power, but other minorities may not benefit. So for example, my grandfather was, yeah, he was a British supporter because, you know, his kids got to go to they got a British education for free, and like he was able to work with them on like plantations. So I think also the reason for the colonizing country to come to a non-colonized country also depends on the question of like how useful the resources are to the dominant power. So I think it's a complicated question.
And I think it also changes, like you were saying, Simone, about what the intentions were. Because I think for Canada and the US, I'm looking at Matt through the Zoom call, for our countries, the colonization came in the form of wanting land. And not necessarily wanting to bring technology and getting rid of the people who were already there. I can't speak for the US, but for Canada, before Canada was Canada, it was very much of wanting the land, hoping that it had a passage to the other side of the world and like all these different things. So it was really getting rid of the indigenous people that were there was a big goal, and assimilating them in to the British culture. That was kind of the aim of what was occurring. It wasn't necessarily wanting to adapt to them. At that time, the colonialism was truly become Christian and become British, which is why languages and groups of people did die. But I think, yeah, it's really situational in terms of now when colonialism or like more modern history, it was done in a different way. It actually helped Hong Kong, as David was saying, to a degree, but in the case of before Canada was Canada, it definitely was a land grab, and to spread power, because at that point Britain was a lot bigger than it is today.
Exactly. I think it's the same case of like Malaysia and Hong Kong, where they have like, you said, David, Hong Kong was a fishing village with a useful port, and same with Malaysia, that we also have really useful ports and natural resources. So I think it was more like the British needed the know-how and the skills and the knowledge of the local people to utilize those things so they could expand their territories economically. So I think it's really a different case compared to Canada and the US, like Sarah was saying.
It was only in the last century that residential schools started closing in Canada. So the assimilation isn't the right word, but that's how they defined it. Didn't actually end. It didn't end not too long ago, because Canada's a relatively young country in comparison to others. So our history is more modern than some of the other cultures around us.
No, I think it's like depending on if the country is trying to abuse the resources of that area versus whether or not the country has good intentions, which we usually know the countries usually don't have good intentions. But whether or not the country benefited economically, it depends on the situation. But I think something we could pretty much all agree with is that colonialism always causes identity crises inside of the countries that they are involved with, right? So, I mean, I think a lot of Hong Kong's internal perceptions were influenced a lot by the British getting involved, where it created conflicts internally from an outside perspective, you know? I don't know if that's something you would agree with, David, or not.
I 100% agree. It's not something I chose. I was just born with it. The day I born, I was like influenced by another country, and I can't call myself entirely Chinese at the same time. This is what I thought before all the bad things happened. I thought of myself as a Chinese citizen, and I look forward to the reunification. Like when I was younger. But that as time goes and I learn more about ourselves, learn more about Hong Kong, I slowly develop another separate identity than just as a Chinese. I started to develop that identity that I'm a Hong Konger, because I realized there are many things that we do different than the mainland Chinese people. The language, and in terms of daily practice as well. Like, you know, in China, for example, in the business world, they talk about connection, they talk about networking a lot. They basically, if you want to get anything through, you need to know a guy. And Hong Kong is not like that, because we have been playing by the law. Like the rule of law was very important. The rule of law is very important in Hong Kong. So you don't need to know a guy to do anything. You just do it by the regulation. You do it by the law. You get what you want. Like that's why it was very easy to do business in Hong Kong as well, because we don't have that kind of private relationship thing. That's one very major difference we have, I think. And I would say colonialism actually make us lose part of our identity and created this whole conflict at the same time. I really don't know whether it's a good thing or bad thing at this point, because on a good side, I think we are somehow more improved. Like we have our own culture. We have many interesting things that we develop. But on the bad side, we are in a conflict right now because of our identity.
How do you feel about Britain currently in terms of trying to accept people who are leaving Hong Kong? I know that's been they're dealing with Brexit, but they've also been making attempts to, I guess, accept, I don't know if the correct word here is refugees, or just people trying to escape the political turmoil. Do you think it's like kind of a little too late, or like you're grateful, or?
I'm grateful, but at the same time, I feel like it's a little bit too late too. I mean, originally they should have had the Hong Kong people part of the negotiation tables too when they're handing over Hong Kong back to China, because they're not the direct benefiters there. We are the people who are directly being influenced by the hangover, right? So in that case, they didn't involve us at all when they were negotiating with the Chinese government. And now they're having Brexit, and they're having lots of troubles. And I think the Hong Kong people are very good human capital, and many of the other countries, they wanted to take us in as well. Well, mainly probably because of humanitarian reasons, but on the same time, I think we could be a good economic resources to all these countries too. And to be honest, other than this, the UK are not doing a lot to help our situation. And I don't think there's anything they could do anyway, because this is a really big international conflict. There's like bigger things happening behind the scenes. But I'm grateful for all the countries that are helping right now.
But I guess this is the problem with like colonial powers and the fact that nobody's holding them responsible to decolonize territories. So now, like you guys are saying, it's kind of a nice gesture, but it's a bit too late.
It's kind of, I guess, similar to the apartheid that happened in South Africa, where it was kind of like they were there and then they were like, okay, do your thing now, resolve it with yourself, and didn't really leave any constructive measures in place. They just kind of did their thing, then got out. And we're like, good luck, you'll be fine.
Do you guys worry about, so we talked about how when the colonial powers come in and they mess up things and then they leave and let people sort it out? Do you worry about those powers coming back into fold afterwards? Do you worry about that making it worse? Like them not fully understanding or fully representing again as well, and trying to dominate over the actual voices of people by whatever they have their own interest in again? You know, like, what is the full intention of them when they come back into the fold, right? Have their intentions changed from in the beginning? Or are they just, is this like colonialism part 2?
In Hong Kong, most of the people are just feeling this is colonialism part 2, because once again, we're not part of any talk, we're not part of any policy discussion, we're not part of anything. Our voice was never heard, and now we're basically just doing something that we're just listening orders again. And as I said, we were speaking different languages. We speak different languages. We have a little bit of different cultural background. So we feel like we're just being controlled by another group of foreigners again. And obviously, as we are very, I mean, right now we have internet. We know many things about the world. We learn about democracy. We learn about so many things. We don't want that anymore. We want to be ourselves. So this created a really big conflict.
I have a question. I don't know how you'd respond or feel about it, but as you're saying, it's colonialism part 2. Are you wanting Hong Kong to be its own established country, or would you be happy, I guess, to settle of becoming something like Canada, like a Commonwealth country, where you're your own country, but you also have, or like Australia's Commonwealth, New Zealand's Commonwealth, like having another country technically above you, like this, I don't know how else to put that, but you also get to be your own established country? Or are you wanting to just be like completely like it's just Hong Kong, it's not part of something else?
For political reason, I will not answer that reason, answer the question, but I would say I would like Hong Kong to retain high degree of autonomy. This is what we were promised before, and I just hope that the two countries that signed the contract could keep their words. Because what is happening right now is very simple. You are not listening to the people. If the government have heard us and just be nice to us, nothing like this would have happened. The only thing that happening, the reason why all this happened is because the new government do not understand us, and they did not try to understand us. If they have resolved the problem earlier, none of this would have happened. Because like 10 years ago, most of the Hong Kong people are very, very okay under the China rule. But because Chinese government having tighter control over us, and we spoke, like we protest, and then we tell that we want a little bit different way, but they didn't listen, and they even make even worse policies. Like they tighten up their control on us. So I think the problem is like they don't understand us. If they try and they try if they try to understand us, I think it will be better.
Yeah, definitely. Well, David, it's been really great speaking with you today. If anyone has any final questions or a closing statement they wish to make, now would be the time. So why don't we go down? Simone, do you want to go first?
Thanks for your time, David. I think it was really interesting discussion on how like these cultural and linguistic factors that we might not really think about play into like a bigger political scale. Because I think I think we started this discussion kind of just focusing on like cultural aspects and differences between mainland China and Hong Kong, but I can understand now that these differences are very important to understand the current geopolitical climate and these like questions and issues of freedom and democracy. So thank you for your perspective.
Dmitry, any last things you'd like to say?
To be honest, I wasn't really that like educated about Hong Kong because I don't know much, to be honest, and that's why some of the things that you said, they were like literally eye openers for me. And thank you for your time, and thank you for like enlightening me.
Matt?
Yeah, I think they both said it all. Thank you. It's always good to talk to you, and it's always good to talk about these ideas of, like you said, everything's multifaceted, right? So it's important to always change your perspectives to make sure you understand the different layers of things. So it's always good talking.
And David, anything else you'd like to add?
I'm glad to be here. I wish the world would be able to pay more attention to Hong Kong and other minorities as well, because we are special too.
Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with us. We're really grateful to have you and to be willing to do this slightly different over Zoom with despite glitches and lags. Thank you so much for cooperating with us.
And thanks to Sara for hosting.
So this will be posted to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for spending the semester with us. We'll be releasing one last video, just wrapping up the semester, but thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe down below.